Hey everybody, and welcome to week 2 of the Confidence to Get Visible course. I'm just going to switch off my everything that's beeping at me. So we are today looking at creating impact, and the impact that I'm talking about is how you create impact on yourself. So it's not about yet what you're going out in the world to do, it's how you create this impact so that you are feeling much more powerful. And a lot of that is about starting to address what are the beliefs that you have and where have they come from, and that's a really important thing. So what we're going to do today is, again, I'm going to run through a live teach. There's going to be some quite in-depth ideas around how your mind works, some real NLP training, a little bit of understanding about some of the neuro-linguistic processes that I use and that I integrate into my work, and also something else called timeline therapy. I've got everything popping up. Timeline therapy, how that works, what that is, what it means, what I'm talking about when I refer to your timeline. Good morning, Samantha. Just seen you're coming in. I'm just about to dive straight in. As always, if anyone has any questions that are watching on replay or who are in live, then do let me know. Hey, Samantha, I'm just going on with the live teach. So as any questions as you come and go, I think you're muted. Yes, you are. Any questions, then just let me know. So I'm just going to share my screen, bring this up for you. Okay, should be the right one. Great. So I'm just going to play this for you now. So we are already, and I don't know where the time's going, on week 2 of the Confidence to Get Visible course. I'm just going to hide. Actually, I'll come back out and I'm going to hide us both. You don't need to see us. There we go. So yeah, we're already on week 2, and this week is all about creating impact that is impactful on yourself. So that for me is about acknowledging things that have been holding you back, acknowledging the language, and starting to make those real changes to how you think and feel. Now, you've probably already, over the course of the last week, if you've been doing the workbook and you've been really starting to think and action the hypnosis tracks as well, you've probably started to notice a little bit of a shift in how you're thinking. Now, one of those things might be that you felt very sad, or you felt quite low, acknowledging some of the things that were holding you back, the things in your life that you are saying again and again that you don't want, and yet they're happening. Acknowledging where you're at in your life, sometimes that acknowledgement of that can be a really powerful moment. Don't worry, we're not leaving you there. This is part of a process. So the other thing you might have noticed is that you might have been having some quite significant dreams. I know a few of you have put that into the Facebook group. That's really, really common. What happens when we start to have these new neural pathways be created is that we process, though they happen when we're awake, but they tend to then be processed while we're asleep and embedded while we're asleep as well. So more of those connections, while something might have happened in your conscious waking state, actually then the groundwork to make it part of your new programming happens while you sleep, which is why people then often go on and have vivid dreams, or they wake up and there's a particular word or phrase that is really, really strong for them, and you think, what's that all about? That is the work happening. Now, if you're not having that, that's okay too. You might be aware that some bits from your past are kind of being flagged up. Things that you think, oh, it's interesting that I thought that. I've always thought, where did that come from? Well, that has come from this belief that you've held for a long time that you're starting to unravel. And very often we have quite a few beliefs about ourselves that have been impacting our life, and they're all connected. So a big belief that we have in NLP is that how we do one thing is how we do everything, because they are all interconnected. So this is why I want you to become really conscious in your conscious mind of what you are saying, thinking and doing, because that actually impacts your subconscious that runs all your programs. It's that important. So throughout this course, as you're starting to unravel lots of this stuff, I want you to start getting more confident to take action online to get visible. Although this course doesn't really focus on the actions you need to take, I think through doing this course, you do become aware of how you've potentially been hiding or holding yourself back. When you notice those things, go and take the action you need to get out there. So this is all about all the work we're doing here. Yes, it's very personal, but actually it's how it's what informs the activities you take for your business. So we're going to be investigating what is it that holds you back. And that is the very specific thoughts that you're having, the particular memories you have that are about specific moments that you feel like this is connected to this and this is the same as that. I'm sure we all have moments where we think, oh, this has happened again. This always happens to me. What are your beliefs around that and what do they look like? And this is the big question. This is the root of it all. Why are you afraid? What are you afraid of? And very often we're afraid of being ourselves, being seen as ourselves. That's the real visibility piece. For people actually knowing that we are capable, that we can be comfortable being ourselves, that can actually be really scary. And there's a wonderful quote. If you don't know it, I really advise you to go and look at the Desiderata. It's got a wonderful quote in that. And also one of my favourites is by Marianne Williamson, that it is not our light that frightens us. It's not our darkness that frightens us most. It is our light, because we are powerful beings. If you don't know Marianne Williamson's work, maybe go and have a look at one of her really famous quotes. So I'm interested in starting to unravel in this course is, what did you learn? What have you learned about yourself, and who do you think you are and who do you think you are not, that is impacting yourself, that is impacting what you feel you can go on and do, that impacts how much action you feel you are able to take, that impacts your bravery, that impacts your courage. And I want you to start to understand that the story that you're carrying about yourself, actually, if you don't do anything to start to unravel this, you are perpetuating the story. You are the only one telling that story. You are the only one who is allowing that story to continue. So you have some control and you have some choice about what happens in your future and in your present. And actually, to some degree, you have control over what's happened in your past, because as we will be unraveling throughout this course, the things that happened to you in your past, you have deleted, distorted, and generalized in order to fit an old, outdated model of your subconscious. So my old wounds, I talk about this very openly. I used to believe that I didn't belong. I used to believe that I couldn't make good connections, that if I was in a group, I would be the one who was very different. And that, of course, impacted all of my relationships. Now, professionally, in my early stages as an actor, I could never understand why, when I was talented, I wasn't making the right connections and that I was being overlooked and that I wasn't seen. Now, my book, actually, one of the early chapters that's coming out shortly, one of the early chapters in that is me, when I did some of this NLP and timeline therapy work, was a very early moment in my school career. I was actually probably age 4, maybe just 5. And I realized that many other children had been selected, the popular children had been selected to be in a play that went and actually toured the county. And I can remember feeling really flushed, really visceral things I can remember, because that's how our brain stores information. I can remember the feel of the parquet floor that we were sitting on, what it felt like to be cross-legged at that time, how tight my collar and tie were as I felt flushed. I can remember just that nobody would have known this was going on, but that sense of anger, embarrassment, resentment, frustration that I hadn't been selected, and this big thing for people that gave them lots of opportunity was something that was withheld from me. And they're very big thoughts for a 4 or 5-year-old to have, but children are having thoughts of that magnitude. Now, for me, I can pinpoint that was the beginning of me believing I was going to be overlooked. And then that was compounded by, I'd want to speak up in class, and I was naturally very gifted at talking and speaking and reading. It's funny where my career went, but actually I would feel then uncomfortable that I'd put myself out there. So there was this duality between doing the thing that I loved and really wanted to be seen doing, and this awkwardness that was inside me, because of my fears around how I would be seen and how I would be overlooked. So many of my actions then, as my career developed in my early 20s, actually I knew I was talented, I knew I was good, but actually I was a bit embarrassed that I was having to audition in the first place, and I had this belief that I would be overlooked. Now when you've had 25 years of programming, and that is coming through, that comes not only through the way you connect with people in a room, but it also the way you carry yourself, your energy, your body language, it is all there because I had that very strong belief that I was going to be overlooked. So for me, I used to really push in auditions to be seen, to be recognized, to be heard, but actually I was deeply uncomfortable with it. So I hope that that does make sense. I hope that resonates with you on some level. Many of us do these things without realizing that we've fallen into patterns. And that's just one example for me of the old patterning that I had. So how that sense of being overlooked and not belonging fed into my personal life was that I would go to parties at university or wherever, and I would believe that I didn't belong and no one was talking to me. Yet I'd have a nice time, but I would have this part of my brain that would be saying I didn't really fit in, I didn't belong like everybody else, I wasn't really one of the crowd. But to the outside world, no one would have known that was going on, but it did inform the thoughts that were going on in my head. So I hope that that makes a little bit of sense. Now, professionally, those thoughts were still really prevalent. And it was only then when I reached this crisis point and I was in a wheelchair and I had to address everything that I was saying and thinking about myself, that I suddenly realized that this old story about being different and not fitting in and being overlooked and not recognized was hugely problematic for someone who at that point wanted a career as a performer. Now, you all know what's happened for me as a result of getting over that stuff, recognizing how it was holding me back, and then actually taking action to, one, change my thoughts, two, change my programming, and three, then change the actions and behaviors to be seen, be heard, be recognized, and be comfortable doing so. Because I don't want any of you to have what I had, which was that sense of armor or protection, and that I was going out to fight. I want the level of success and visibility that you create for yourself to be something really congruent, that is comfortable. So my new choices became, and if only I had known them at age 20, my new choices became that I am confident and I am capable and I don't have to push, that I can easily connect with people, and that I do belong. I can choose where I belong. So as a result of those choices, I decided that I could choose to be at the top of my industry. I could choose to be recognized by myself. I could choose that I didn't need outside validation. And that's a very, very different thing. And as a result of that, not only did I then just take some really big risks, but some exciting adventures for my career. For example, having never before been able to do this and be comfortable in a room networking, I decided that I would book a flight to, this time it was, the first time was in New York, to a place where I knew all of the industry leaders in the US would be. And I went into that room and I was open about what I wanted, what stage of my journey I was at, and the fact that I was really passionate about what I did. And as a result, I made some phenomenal connections, and I left that meeting, that conference, with over $30,000 worth of bookings, because I was comfortable with myself and what I stood for, and it didn't feel uneasy. Previously, I could never have done that. Now, that didn't mean I walked into that room and I was, the center of attention. That's still not me. That's still not how I choose to be. But it meant that I could make genuine connections with people in that room, knowing that I, even though I was at the beginning of that part of my career, that I was worthy of being there, and that I could choose to belong and see those moments of connection in the room. So that was part of my story, and then my choices. So we do carry around with us the demons of our past. We are carrying in our brains every single moment that we have ever encountered. It's all up there. Some of it does get blacked out if it's traumatic and your subconscious is not ready for you to deal with that consciously, but all the memories are still there, filed away in this filing cabinet that I have described for you last week in our training. And what that means is that the memories that come to you are connected in some way, and we're going to look at those connections as we go through today. But we are carrying a lot of those demons from our past, and next week we will be looking at historic monsters, so specific people and events that have triggered you. Essentially, they haven't triggered you, you chose for them to be a trigger unconsciously for you to have certain beliefs. So the danger isn't in how you think. The danger is in how you think about what happened to you, not in what actually happened. So if you take any event from your past, it could be, if you inserted a different person into that event instead of you, they could have taken very different choices about how they reacted and responded. So for example, if you had a moment in class where a teacher tells you that you are stupid and that your writing is untidy, and you won't amount to anything, one person might decide, because of their worldview, their own unique model of the world, that that teacher is right and that they must never pick up a pen again, and that they are stupid, so it's probably not worth trying. Another person who has a different worldview, different model of the world from their upbringing, their social background, the incidences and specific of events that have happened, and how they have then catalogued it in their brain, might well decide that this was actually information and fuel to the fire to prove that they are a brilliant writer and to exceed beyond doubt that people recognised and saw that. Somebody else might decide that that was the teacher's fault, it was the teacher to blame, whereas someone else might internalise it as that they are at fault for that event happening. It's the same event, but it's how you deal with it. And we often don't see those things. We think that things that happen to us are so deeply personal and shameful that and they've become such a part of our story that we have never stopped to look at things from another perspective. So in how we process memories then, I talked a little bit about how we bring it on 2 million pieces of information per second and then we delete. We have to filter them so that they are fitting into our worldview, which was formed between ages 6 weeks and 7 years old. So we have deleted, we have distorted, and we have generalized all sorts of things to fit our model. And what I'm offering in this course is an opportunity for you to have a powerful reframe about what those specific events were and how impactful they have been on your life up until now. So what I'm not talking about is forgetting the memories and saying they never happened or that they weren't powerful in your life. It's not about denying the experience. It's about having an opportunity to look through a different lens. Because that's the thing, when we've deleted all sorts of information, we're missing key components about in the resource of our mind, we're missing key components about an activity that happened. So when you think about this, it's about how you could have identical twins who have had very, very similar background, very, very similar societal and education experiences. However, the unique relationships that they have with their parents and they have with the outside world, things that are said to them, how then they take those instances and put them in their own worldview, which will be completely different because that different parts of those experiences are being deleted, distorted, and generalized. So identical twins actually can then see the world in a very, very different way and process and react to things in a very different way. There might be similarities, but they will not be identical. So first of all, what I want you to do, either now or maybe if you're watching later, you can do it on replay, is to think about, when you think about your past, where is it located? So I'd just like to invite you to right now actually I'll show you the next image first. If you imagine that the red spot is your head, and what I'd like you to do is I would like you to close your eyes and I would like you to think about, where is your past located? Some people find it's behind them, some it's to the side, some it's in front. Point with your hand where your past is located when you think about it. And then I want you to think about, where is your future? If you had to think about your future and things that you're going towards, or where is your future in terms of your body? So if you imagine that's your head, your body's right in the middle. And if you imagine then, if you just open your eyes now, if you've been doing that as we were speaking, and it might be that if that didn't come to you immediately, that you might want to do this exercise whilst I'm not talking after you finish watching this, or press pause. So if you imagine then that you have a timeline that runs through your body, so it might be that your past is behind you in one of these arrows, and maybe your past, maybe it's slightly to the left or slightly to the right, and then maybe your future is immediately to the side or in front of you. If you can imagine that there is effectively a line that runs with you through it, so you are central to it, or you are to the side of this timeline, and you imagine that your past and your future were pulled out into one line with you, your head, your body at now. So this is what your timeline might look like. And when we play around with that timeline, which some of you may do with me in your one-to-one session, depending on what we need to unravel for you. If you could imagine that your timeline was just this one strip, and if you in your mind's eye were to, if with your eyes closed, float up above your timeline, you would be able to zoom in and out to inspect what has happened between your past, your future, and now, so that you could zoom in and out. And if you went really, really high up and you imagined that you were on the top of the Eiffel Tower looking down, your line would be very, very small. But if you then came much closer in your mind's eye and floated down towards it, it would be close, and you would be able to go along that timeline to find specific memories and specific events in your filing cabinet. That for me is what this timeline is. It's essentially your filing cabinet of how your brain is storing this concept of the past, the present, and the future. So when we think about the past, there are different ways we think about the past as well. So as you can see on this diagram, if you start on the right hand side, if you're at now, you know which way your future goes. Okay. Now, when we think about the past, we might be thinking in terms of our past, our own personal past lifetime, or our own lifetime in the past. Okay. We then might be thinking about before we were born in the past. So the stories about how we came into the world, perhaps even the stories about what was happening when our mother was pregnant with us. We have, for whatever reason, internalized those stories into our filing cabinets. Then we have all sorts of things that we believe are genealogically passed down to us, or are from past generations. So it might be that, oh, our family are always like that, dad was like that, granny was like that, oh, do you remember great grandma, that's what she always did, that's how we are. That's what we're talking about in terms of the genealogical past, the things that you have a belief you have carried down the family line. We all have stories like that. It's not necessarily true. And then there's the generational past as well. So stories about your ancestors that you might be vaguely aware of, or even that maybe you believe you don't have any generational past stories. That in itself can then impact your concept of your past on your timeline, and impact how you feel about yourself now. And then, of course, there are these ideas of past lifetimes. So, and what I want to say about this is that I'm not necessarily a believer of past lifetimes. However, in that kind of woo-woo sense of I've lived and I've been reborn. However, our brains may well be carrying stories about past lifetimes we may have lived in order to package up how it understands and interprets the world around it. So the first time I encountered this timeline therapy work, in terms of my past lifetime, that's where I uncovered that I, from age 5, believed that I didn't belong. Now, when I think about that in terms of when I was born, before I was born, what that meant was that actually I'd got some story about how I came into the world, that I wasn't supposed to be here. I was a bit different. I was the only one of my siblings who was emergency C-section. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was a bit different because I was unwell when I was born. So that's connected with my birth and actually the trauma of me being born. We all hold stories about this that we don't recognize consciously, but we have, as human beings, been aware of things right up until pretty much from when we're in the womb. we're carrying information about stories we have heard, seen and experienced, but without the full resource of all the information that was happening. And that's a very common thing that we start to uncover. So for example, many people that I work with in this thing actually come down to, I'm not loved and I'm not enough because my mother was unhappy during the time she was giving birth. Now, it doesn't matter whether you remembering you being born is true or not. What it matters is that your brain has parceled up that event as so significant for this belief that you hold about yourself. So for me, the generational past was initially that my dad always feels that he doesn't belong. And he would then talk about, oh, we're different than Naples is. There's always a black sheep. A black sheep wouldn't actually be his words, but that's my interpretation of his words. There'd always be a black sheep in the family. There'd always be someone who sticks out like a sore thumb. And he would then list for me people in our past or my Scottish ancestry that were like that. And that would, on the one hand, create a sense of belonging for me. I belonged to these people who don't belong, if you're following my words. And then actually for me, when I did some of this timeline therapy work, I kept having this image, this dream about this woman, this Scottish woman who had been thrown down a well many, many, many generations ago. Now, I don't believe I ever was that woman or anything like that, but that story about rejection in Scotland, my Scottish ancestry, was part of my belief system that was impacting, because of how my subconscious had packaged things together, that was impacting my now and was going to impact my future. So I hope that gives a little overview about what I'm talking about in terms of this timeline and how it might affect you. So it doesn't matter whether you believe you really have had past lifetimes. It doesn't really matter whether you believe that things have been passed down to you generationally. What's important is how your subconscious has packaged all of these different elements of your past into how you are behaving, acting and feeling right now. So I'm really interested in acknowledging and then letting go of these stories about your past. And that's one of the things we'll start to be doing, certainly in this workbook and next week's workbook, in order to recognize, identify, and then breaking the chain. So we'll be talking about the chain in a moment, what that actually is. So again, if you have any questions as we go through, please do put them into the chat box. So these decisions, these limiting decisions that we've made about ourselves, that we've potentially been carrying from somewhere between 6 weeks and 7 years old, how do these limiting decisions affect your business now? And I want you to start thinking about that. And how do your thoughts and your emotions concerning this limiting decision that you made, or limiting decisions, it may be plural, but that are all connected, affect your life? How do they affect everything else that's not business? And the reason I ask both is that how we do one thing is how we do everything. So what I'm interested in is in us finding a way through your workbooks, through these trainings that I'm giving you, and then compounding when you come on for the discovery with the personal call with me, is discovering the root cause of your main belief about yourself. So what I want to just address now are the core emotions that we have that impact how we feel about ourselves. So when we are somewhere between age 6 weeks and maybe even 6 months, we will be experiencing for the first time the following emotions: anger, sadness, fear, hurt, and guilt. There are more emotions, but they are the core ones. I'm just going to go through those again. At some point between age 6 weeks and 6 months, you will have experienced anger, sadness, fear, hurt, or guilt for the first time. And there will be an event and a belief that you had around that. Now, you were very, very young. This is all unconscious. The next time you then have an episode where you experience anger or hurt or sadness, or for each of these episodes, let's take anger. You will have, the next time you experience anger, it will have been similar. So you will have deleted, generalized, and distorted to fit your model, age 6 weeks or 6 months old, that this is anger. As you then become older and you are maybe even six months to a year, maybe 18 months, someone will have told you, oh, you're angry, or she's angry, or he's angry. It will have become labeled. So your brain will then go, okay, every time someone tells me I'm angry, it relates to that very first time I was angry. And so on and so forth. So each time you are angry, it's going into the angry file. It is joining that chain of all your beliefs about being angry. The same for sadness, the same for fear, the same for hurt, the same for guilt. So what I'm curious about is the belief you have about yourself, this limiting belief that's been holding you back. We'll take, for example, my belief that I don't belong. Initially, I thought on my timeline that it was concerned with when I was 5 years old. And actually, as I began to unravel it, there were many more beliefs I held about not belonging that were so early in my life. And so what we do is then we look at, where did it come from? What is it? What are the other stories connected with it? What's the specific moment where that decision was made? And we take you back along that timeline. So start to think for yourself, what are the memories that are flagging up for me about the belief I have about myself? And then once you've got that very specific memory and you have written as much as you can about it, actually what's connected to that? Is there a belief before? Is there something that's come from my family belief, my generational belief? Is there some past life imagery that's coming to me, some feeling? And be on the lookout for all of the exercises you're doing with me over the next few weeks. Be on the lookout for images that pop into your head, tension that pops into your body, sensation that pops into your body, thoughts, feelings, words, phrases. Any of these things that come up to you, write them down, be aware, because these are giving you really valuable clues for how it's connected to something else. So I've talked about how neuro-linguistic programming is about examining your words and your story. And it's because every single word is connected to another and connected to because of how you filed it away. So we are looking to unravel all of that stuff. And I'm going to go into how you internalize words and stories and associations much more next week. But if anything comes up for you this week through a dream, through a thought you're having when you're driving or doing the washing up or having a shower, or a conversation you have and you think, that's funny, I don't know if I think that anymore. Be aware, where's that coming up for you? Excuse me. So I want to just bring you really to a concept of the gestalt of memories. And they are really associated with those 5 core emotions. And the work really that we are doing, excuse me, the work really that we are doing as part of this course. So as we look at your timeline, so you can see the red line here represents a timeline. So you know which is past, which is present, which is future. So if you imagine the part of the line that we are now looking at is just in your past, and that it is actually your past where the very first moment something happened. That's where the black line coming down is. And this round dot that you can see, we're going to explore anger, but this could be for any of those 5 core emotions. That first event where you experienced anger is at this point where you are between 6 weeks and 6 months old. It could be earlier, it could be later, but on the whole, that's when they tend to first happen and when they are often first labelled. So the next time you have an event, which would be the second chain down. This is, if you imagine, it's like a bead of pearls that are strung together. I like to think about it like that. So the red line is my timeline, the black are the pearls of the gestalt, the chaining of my memories connected with a core emotion. So as you can see here, we've got 5 episodes of anger. So let's say all of these have happened by the time you are 7 years old. There's probably many more, but for this purpose. And then by the time you reach 30, 35, 40, 45, whatever, you have a lifetime, without doing any of this work that we're now doing, you have a lifetime of experiences that are all connected and are all on the same chain or are all filed in the same cabinet. Now, what's interesting is that the way you have fitted them together, the way you've chained them, you've had to generalize, delete, and distort information to put them together, which means that they aren't actually the same thing. Now, we started using the example of something that happened to you when you were 6 months or 6 weeks or six months old. But these core beliefs about yourself, when you understand how it works for your emotions, actually it then works when something traumatic happens to you. So it might be that you're treated poorly in a relationship, and actually that might be connected with how you perceived yourself as a young child. There's also some common beliefs that then arise through trauma or difficult circumstances as an adult. So it's not that we're not forming these things anew, but it's often associated with something very difficult in your life, which would create a new gestalt of memory, if you like. So, excuse me. So what we're aiming to do through this work is, when we can assess that this top memory, this first memory, that you didn't get it right, that you were wrong, that you deleted, generalized and distort, we are essentially on your timeline cutting that first ball. So if you imagine that the scissors are actually going to cut underneath that first ball, so your memory is still there, your experience of that first anger is still there, but it doesn't have to be connected to all the subsequent memories. So for example, when we look at how we might have an argument now with our spouse or a loved one, and we immediately in that argument say, for example, it was about how the coffee was left in the jug, for example, and it had gone horrible. That's a real pet peeve of mine, in case you hadn't noticed. Actually, when you get into that full-blown argument, the argument then becomes not about the coffee, but it's about all those things you did to me that made me feel this way. Now, it's not about the coffee, it's all about those past things that have happened. And actually, it's not even about that relationship, it's about your beliefs and views on your relationship based on all of these emotions you have carried about anger your whole life. And then again about these beliefs you hold about yourself. So if you can unravel and let go of the emotion connected to the events that happened to you in your past, you still have all of the memory, but you can learn from them and develop from them and see choice in how you think, feel and behave. So when we're looking to go back throughout the workbook over the next week or so, it's not that we're going back to relive the saga at all. It's quite the opposite. We're going back so that you can examine the choice that you made at the time that thing happened to you. You can start to fill in the blanks as to what you didn't see, what you didn't notice, what you didn't hear, the bits you filtered to distort the worldview, the model of the view that you already had as a child. And we're essentially undoing the delete. This is like the redo button. We also like to make, at this point, your memory really specific. So instead of saying it is like this as well, and the next thing that happened to me is like this, that's a generalization. We make the events specific. So they are unconnected, they are isolated events that do not have to correlate into everything else. So we are breaking that chain, we are breaking that gestalt of memory. And one of the things that really helps me is understanding this core principle of NLP. So NLP isn't a belief system, it is a model for how our brains work. And it goes something like this: everyone is doing the best they can at all times with the resources they have available. So those resources are what's going on in the moment. The resources are how their brain is deleting, generalizing and distorting. So for me, when I've been in an argument with something, or something has been, it's felt as though it has been done to me, it's about, not that it's necessarily about forgiveness, but it's about understanding in their model of the world, in the other person involved in the incident or the event, everyone, including them, is doing the best they can with the resources they have available. And their resources, other people's resources and awareness of themselves, may well be much more limited than yours. And that, for me, allows me to look very differently at events that happen to me. So the resources you had were limited at the time a significant event happened to you, particularly if you are under the age of 7. You could not possibly know and decide everything about you at that age. In fact, even now, you cannot possibly know everything you're capable of at this age. And that whoever else was involved in that incident, they had, or that event, they had limited availability of resources. They did not know everything. They might have had more influence than you, but they did not know everything. And so their intentions are always the best for themselves. Very rarely do people deliberately do anything to harm or hurt somebody else. What they are doing is protecting their own model of the world, if that makes sense. If you have any questions around that, if that's not clear, then please do ask. I know that this can be quite a big learning for people. So whatever happened to you in your events that are significant in your past about your beliefs and about your emotions, you did not see the whole picture because you were deleting. The decision and the belief story you created was the best possible you could have done at the time. But it was not the only possibility. It's not the only response you could have chosen. And furthermore, that event that happened to you and what you took it to mean, it is not true. Because we talked last week about letting go. We talked last week about right and wrong and about letting go. So we're here then to help you acknowledge the pain of what happens. We're not denying those significant events, but I want you to get to a point where you realize that it doesn't serve you anymore, doesn't serve you any longer to stay trapped in that story, letting that event have power over you and who you think you are. So we're going to start to work towards installing new decisions. So very often, we're talking about visibility in this course, very often we have decided that we are going to stay hidden. And that served us when we were young, or it served us earlier in our lives. Or we've decided to consciously stay quiet. And that's then become a habit. And that's then actually then as you go through life, that's become painful because you then don't get the results you want because you have stayed hidden or you've stayed quiet. So for example, to give you an idea of what this looked like for me, the story in my house was that I was more capable than my brothers. And I loved my brother, who was older than me. I've got 3 brothers. I'm second. So in order to not overshadow my brother and make him feel uncomfortable and overshadowed, I decided to not be my true self. And this happens at an unconscious level, but it meant that I then would sabotage my results so that I didn't outshine my brother. We do these kinds of things all the time. If you have been, perhaps you've been really artistic, or you've been a loud child, or maybe even a bossy child, they're not good terms anyway. So I really look at those wordings. But just to give you a gist, it might be that someone at some point has quashed your activity and you have taken it to mean that you should be quiet. And that then becomes something, or that you don't have the right to speak up. That then impacts lots of decisions that you make about yourself. So we've made these decisions in order to protect ourselves. We made them for the right reason, or we decided to protect others. And it was the best decision you could have made in previous circumstances, given your model of the view and the resources you had available to you. But what I'd like to challenge is that hiding has become a habit for you. What happens then is your subconscious quickly makes associations. That's how it likes to work. It likes to link similar things and ideas through internal representation, which I'll look at a lot more in detail next week. It's quite a big topic that I want you to understand. But essentially, your subconscious is working on the principle of least effort. So it likes to make habits. It likes thoughts, habits, behaviors to become habitual so that it is preserving energy. So that energy is then used for the rest of your programming, and that you've got these reserves for fight or flight, which is a really big part of our programming as well. And your subconscious needs repetition until a habit is installed. So that is one of the reasons why, as we're making new habits and new awareness, I'm asking that you listen to those tracks as often as you can. They're a really vital component of this course if you want to get some results and feel very differently about yourself. Your subconscious also needs clear orders to follow. Now, this is interesting for me, because if you are telling your subconscious over and over again that you are not confident, that you are shy, that it's risky to put yourself out there, well, guess what your subconscious is going to think? Guess what it's going to notice? Because that is the instruction you are giving it. So we want to be starting to think about what orders do we want to regularly be giving our mind. And I'll talk about that in a minute. Your subconscious is amazing. There are many different functions, but really it's about you having your ultimate level of life and survival. They're the key things. And your subconscious contains a blueprint of everything going on in your body right now, as well as a blueprint of your perfect health. So what your body looks like in full health, when you're thinking brilliantly, when you are acting brilliantly, when you're behaving brilliantly, and when all of those processes that your subconscious is in charge of, healing, health, digestion, what that blueprint is like. So what I want you to start asking yourself is, which blueprint am I following? Am I following the blueprint that is actually of my perfect health, of my perfect mind, of my perfect body? Or am I following a blueprint that is outdated from a map that I created many years ago that actually doesn't lead to where I want to be? What are you repeating? What are you carrying around with you that is old baggage that actually you didn't need to be carrying in the first place? How does it no longer serve you? So through the workbooks and some of the one-to-one sessions and these teachings, I want you to start to recognize, identify, release and change how you're feeling about yourself. So one of the ways we're going to be doing that is to create new mantras or statements of intent. Now, those of you who did the confidence challenge, the free challenge that I did before I launched this course, you will have an understanding about what those statements of intent are. So these are things you deliberately start saying. You deliberately start saying that are really positive things about yourself. Some people might refer to them as mantras. I like to think of them as much more powerful, that they are statements of who you are and who you are choosing to become. They are statements of your intention. So I want you, as you go through your homework this week, to start to think about, what are those statements of intent that I want my brain to be hearing? These are going to become those clear orders for your subconscious to follow. They're not wishy-washy. They're not just something people who do a lot of yoga do. These are statements of intent that you are doing and crafting deliberately to affect your subconscious, to affect your programming. So your homework is starting to uncover your thought habits. And it's a pretty meaty homework that is something I want you to be doing daily. So you're going to be journaling a lot. It does explain it in the workbook, but I just briefly want to go over it. I want you, through journaling every single day, preferably first thing in the morning, approximately 20 minutes. But the key thing really is to use a notebook and write on 3 pieces of paper. So I tend to use A4 because I know this works and I write quickly. You might prefer A5. This is not War and Peace. Nobody's going to read it, not even you initially. But what you're going to start to do is get everything, all of your blurts, all of your rubbish, just literally brain dump everything. And I've given you, if you find this tricky to start with, I've given you some ideas for what you could journal around. But I want you to get in this process of dumping all of your rubbish that's rattling around your brain onto paper every single day. And then we will be going through that journal and through the things you're saying about yourself in more depth later on. So I want you to start that as soon as possible, so you've got as much to work with as you can. The more you can do that, the better results you're going to get from this course. So I want you to start to recognize the pain, hurt and emotional baggage that you're carrying around with you. I want you to start to recognize the words and phrasing that you use. I want you to really do that workbook, giving it some time and thought, and notice those things that are coming up for you. I want you to be listening to the hypnosis track. This one is about speaking up in public. A lot of being seen is actually, and visible is actually about being heard. And a lot of people, and when it's about speaking up in public, it's not just public speaking. Actually, this can be how you find it difficult to air your views in personal relationships as well. So the track is for both of those things because they're actually interconnected. Next week, we are going to be looking at how to identify your very specific fears. We're going to be looking at the significant historic monsters, the people from your past, what they look like, what they feel like, what you thought you learned from them. There's quite some digging to do, but it's really, really interesting work. We're going to be establishing where you store those internal representations in your body and how you can move them, shift them, change them. And that's the core of what we'll be looking at next week. So that is the live teach for Confidence to Get Visible for week 2. So I hope that you have found that interesting. I'm just going to stop my share if I can. and come back to the call. So, hey Rosie, I didn't even know you were in the room. Nice to see you. I'm just going to unmute you ladies now, and then if you have, do you have any questions about any of that today? It's okay if you don't. It was quite a big detailed teaching.
Yeah, I need to look at the workbook. But what I did want to ask was, I've listened to those hypnosis tracks daily, sometimes twice a day, and I have never ever got all the way through without falling asleep. Is that a problem?
So not a problem. So your subconscious is always listening. This is why when we're in a really, really deep sleep, suddenly we know something's happened and there's an emergency. There is a part of our brain that is always awake and always listening. And our subconscious is picking up absolutely everything, right? It has it all there. You're just not consciously aware. Not a problem if you fall asleep. It's also not a problem if you don't fall asleep. But don't worry about that. It's doing the work. But you want that habit and you want that repetition, because the words are crafted to be really powerful.
Okay, good.
So yeah, good. Hey Rosie, how are you? Oh, I can't hear you. You'll have to type or I think it's your microphone. So yeah, quite a lot of information really about where these thoughts come from. I just thought it was important that you understand that we don't just have a thought. There's a reason why it's there, and how they're all connected. And I wanted you all to do this groundwork as well, because when we have those one-to-one sessions, it will become much clearer why they're important and how much they have impacted you. Yeah, no, it's all right. It's fine. Falling asleep is absolutely fine in the hypnosis tracks. Not a problem. Sometimes actually it's because your mind knows that it wants to get to work making the changes. When you listen to a hypnosis track, sometimes people their conscious mind is still on and they're really aware of lots of the words, and they kind of go, oh, nothing happened to me. The way that those words are crafted, it has an impact even if people think it hasn't. It's very, very clever. It's fascinating stuff. So, and because there are certain stories on there, even if you think that this story doesn't relate to me, I don't get this, the story is already creating new thought loops in your brain. It is fascinating how it works. But so you are processing while you sleep. So sometimes your brain just goes, I want to do that now because that's my new program, and I can't action that until I'm asleep. So yeah, totally fine to not be conscious. But as I said, your brain is picking up everything all the time, and that's why I want people to start to be really aware of the words they're saying about themselves, because your subconscious is always listening. So what you're saying in general conversation, what you're saying when you make a joke about yourself, about how you're always rubbish at something, well, that's actually you programming your brain. It's powerful stuff. So if you're always saying, oh, I'm fearful of this, or I'm scared of that, or I hate this because, well, that's your brain. You're programming your brain. You're programming your subconscious. And yeah, words are powerful. That's the biggest takeaway. The things you say about yourself are immensely powerful.
When you were that little girl on that parquet flooring, how have you I understand that you know that you reacted in that moment in the way that only you could. But how have you, if you look at that little moment, how have you made that better, if you like? How have you made that?
So now I see the world very much as, actually, that could have been quite fun. I could have, and none of this work is about saying I can change the past, because you can't change that, and I can't change how you see things. But I genuinely find my work fun and adventuresome. So when I'm connecting with new people now, I think, how much fun can I have? Who can I connect with, and how might I get more seen, because that's going to be fun, as opposed to going, I'm not going to make that connection because they're going to reject me.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So those emails that we don't send, those people we don't speak to at an event, or we speak to them but then we feel really dodgy about it, I decide not to feel that way, and I will consciously think, actually, this can be fun, I'm going to explore. Whereas before, because I felt I always had to prove something, I was always filled with self-doubt, no matter what was going on, and no matter what result I got, I was filled with that self-doubt. Now, all this work is not to say that I don't ever have moments where I doubt myself, and actually for me it's hormonal. Like, time of the month, catch me for 2 days and I'm a mess. but I can quickly now identify what's going on. So I am much quicker to make sure I change what I say, I change my behaviours, I make sure I take the actions I need to take. I will protect my brain with what I'm saying out loud. My family know, you know, we all know this stuff. My kids are growing up with this stuff. My husband knows it. So we'll catch each other. Just watch what you're saying there. Just be careful. What do you mean to say? And we'll consciously reframe things as a family.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that life is perfect. It isn't, because it's not, and because we're constantly deleting, generalizing, and distorting. But so, for example, I had a complaint last week about something, and for me, my initial is, it's an old habit. Oh my God, it must be me. I'm rejected. I'm not good enough. Blah, that story. I caught myself doing that in about 2 minutes. And so I went, no, this isn't, what are the blanks? What don't I know? What am I not seeing? What is this communication not telling me? And it then gives me just much more ability to take an action that helps me.
Is that for me? Did you leave it? I'm just...
So yeah, so then it allows me to deal with events in a very different way. But essentially, all of this work has enabled me to just be much more playful, much more confident, and to embrace change, to be okay with being seen, and actually see that can be a really good thing, because it's enabled me to create more and to be more who I am. So I hope that makes sense. So I know it's quite a big teaching, so probably quite a lot to absorb. And if you have any questions, do pop them into the group, share them, ask them. If you've got any big stuff that comes up for you that's a bit difficult, and use that group. There are some wonderful women in there, and you will all be having various revelations about yourself and how you've held yourself back and where it's come from. That actually, because you're all going through these learnings, it's a good place to share it. So don't shy back from that. What's fascinating about this work is that some of our things that we think are really shameful are actually hugely common. And I think you all saw that in the challenge that we did. Those real deep fears about I don't belong, I'm not good enough, I'm going to be rejected, nobody loves me. There's about 5 of them that we all feel to some degree, or have felt to some degree. So there's commonalities, and yet they're our biggest fears. So once we understand that those fears are there because that's our subconscious has them there for a reason, that they have served us in some way, actually we can decide like that doesn't have to work for me now. I know it's protected me, I know it's looked after me, but not now. And then you can move forward. So, right, I'm going to wrap up now, but anyone watching on replay, or you ladies, as you process this later, then do ask me questions, use the group, make it an interactive thing, and you'll get much more out of the course. All good? Marvellous. All right, take care. Bye-bye.